The Square Ball Podcast.
Hello there, welcome to the show, part 2 of our Leeds United kit design special with Ed Cowburn. Dan here from the Square Ball, Michael from the Square Ball, Ed Cowburn from Acid FC, who designed the 23-24 Leeds United kits this time around. Should say, if you haven't yet seen part 1 of this, we get into the general background of how it came about, the design process. Worth going back and checking that one out in your feed if you haven't watched or listened to it yet. Show is brought to you with Levi Solicitors. Michael?
That's correct, yep. Gaz, we're handling these shirts one at a time. Should we dedicate this just to Wills?
Just to Wills Pro then Conveyancing.
Yeah, we'll do them one each.
One of the big three. Okay, and so Wills, great at the Wills, aren't they?
So good.
They're really important as well.
They are important. They are genuinely important.
Yeah, you don't want your stuff going to the wrong people, do you? 10% discount on your will. LeviSolicitors.co.uk/the Square Ball for your discount. Home kit then, Ed.
Yes.
Let's talk about the Leeds United home kit, which
Let's do it.
I think in its own way, so the reaction to the third kit is biggest because it's the most out there. But the biggest burden almost is the home kit, isn't it?
Yes, but I suppose though, when knowing that the concept was going to be, peacocks across all of them, it was part of it was also working out kind of how you can dial in and dial up and down on each kit. So we very much looked at the idea that the home was going to be classic. The brief to myself, but kind of internally was like, how can you almost create the most classic Leeds kit there's ever been? And then as you go through each of the kits, you push it and go wilder and wilder. And so that was basically, what was in for the home.
So where should we start with this then? The choice of colours we've got, or the colour, and how that plays into the Adidas template. Where do you want to go with it?
I suppose it's probably good to understand what I had to work with, like template-wise. Mm-hmm. And the answer is that template.
Right.
Literally, there was no choice on for me in terms of collars or any of that stuff. It was literally, this is the template we're using.
Is that because it was chosen by the club or by Adidas at that point in there? Because Adidas obviously controls it.
As far as I know, it was Adidas.
Yeah.
And if you look through the three, there's basically the same template in the body, and there's slightly different collars for each of them. But yeah, that's it. Right. The interesting thing, and I'll refer to it. I mean, there it is.
There is the kit.
We've all seen it.
Yeah.
But it's got panels down the side. It's got like the taping down the side and panels sort of on the under the arms. And if you then, compare it to the away kit and the third, those have got taping on that's coloured. So that was one of the things early on was, does that have to be a contrast colour? And you've probably seen in other clubs that have got this template this season that most of them do have that contrast colour. And I wanted it to be as white as possible.
Yeah.
It's like, it seems obvious, right? But a Leeds kit's white. So it's like, how can we have the whitest of white? We're not going to get white Adidas stripes. So the next best thing was always, to my mind, was like, well, can we colour them the right colour and have them alternating?
Yeah. Sounds like an obvious thing to say, get them the right colour, but there'd been so much playing around with it in recent years, and it coincided with a bit of a turbulent period, obviously, for Leeds United, that it kind of almost had to happen that way, didn't it?
I think the club did you a favour by using the wrong blue and yellow for a number of years, because it meant you could come in and just put it right.
Makes me look really good.
just go. You choose like the proper yellow and blue.
I couldn't agree with you more, honestly. It was such an easy thing to kind of do from that kind of base idea of, can we just have the right colours this year?
Yeah. Rather than orange or black or
or grey or platinum, or gold, or just let's go back to basics. So that was quite an ezy bit, I guess. It's then into like, how do you then integrate a peacock story into an all white garment? So that it was a question of, are we printing on this? Are we is it within the fabric? So if you remember last season's kit, had like an LUFC script kind of running through it. That was a dye sublimation. So that's like ink into the fabric, similar to the away in the third. It's not actually, a woven thing. Whereas you've got opportunities of weaving the fabric, of creating that fabric, but it's expensive. You don't see it very often. Obviously, like Adidas and Nike do it for their elite level stuff. It's got like really weird weaves that you can do, but we're not at that level. So I wanted to try and you get a debossed. So debossed is where they press like a weighted repeat pattern onto the fabric through the rolls, and it basically creates a kind of two-tone. So when you look closely, you'll see that the pattern has got like almost like it's flat where it's not being pressed down, and then where it has been pressed down, it's got like that shine. So you get that kind of luxury kind of feel to it, and it reminded me of sort of the early 90s, our golden era, I suppose. The Champions one, that was really thick fabric, the thick patterning, but these days it's a lot of lightweight fabric, and you can get that real subtlety. And then it was like, where do we put the peacock pattern in? So the repeat pattern was always going to be the thing for the away kit. So it's like dialing that down. So I looked at the pattern of a peacock feather and was like, how do we make this unique to Leeds? So 1919, when we were formed, kind of the heyday of Art Deco, which is, I'm not an art historian. How do I sum it up in a sentence? When
you say Art Deco, though, I know what you mean. Like you're thinking like Macintosh and things like that.
Yeah. A good example would be go to BB's restaurant in Leeds.
Yes.
That kind of vibe. It's got kind of thick lines.
Geometric.
It's kind of geometric, exactly. So I kind of came at it from there and went, well, what if they designed in 1919 a peacock feather? What would that look like? So that's where that comes from. So are these
the kind of design ideas that you're tapping into as you sit there and formulate this?
Yes.
Yeah. So this repeat pattern. So it could have been the debossed, the peacock design, Ed, because away kit you've gone for a slight angle.
Yep.
But we're straight up and down on the home kit. So why the difference there? We can get into the away kit obviously in the next installment of this, but
when I was creating the different ways that you could put a peacock pattern, the straight way was always the way to start with. I think we only started like playing with the dynamics of it when we got to the away kit. So for the home, it was always like let's be traditional and straight, and exactly how as a peacock fan is. I mean, it obviously goes out, but effectively that straight on look is, I think it's also in keeping with that kind of Art Deco kind of feel as well.
It makes me think of a little bit of like almost like a stained glass window.
Yes.
Almost, because obviously there's a lot of stained glass around the Art Deco movement, wasn't there?
Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely that thickness of line. Yeah.
Knowing nothing about debossing as well, are you limited in terms of what you can do by that process as well? Like can you have gradient looking things on that as well?
It's a good question. Well, my main concern, and I asked a similar thing, was like, what level of detail can you get? When I'm creating the artwork, how thin a line can you do before it starts just kind of disappearing? So they gave me I think it was like it needed to be about 3-4 millimeters at its sort of thinnest. So that also kind of lent itself into being able to stick to that kind of quite heavy line Art Deco feel. You can't really do gradients particularly. You'd have to do it where you'd have to have thick dots, similar to, I suppose, the away, but thick dots to try and get that effect and just spread the dots out a little bit. But yeah.
Can I just ask this? I mean, this applies to the away kit as well. So is there part of you that when you're exploring this peacock repeating design before you get to the Art Deco sort of repeating almost like tiled effect, is the part of you thinking, could I just make it look like peacock feathers, like the eyes of a peacock feather? Or is that then when you're starting to fall foul of UEFA guidelines because you can't have images of things?
Yes,
right.
Absolutely right. So whilst I did kind of work on them in order, I started from like that pitch deck from a pure peacock kind of away kit position. So, looking at how can we kind of get something contemporary feeling that does reference as close as possible to that kind of peacock pattern. And, that was, as we said in part one, the sort of rules around, what is possible and what is not. One of the things is like the number of colours that they wanted to have on a kit, for cost purposes. And, in the first version, I had gradients and different colours and trying to get that kind of like a contemporary feel of peacock feathers, but it was just not going to be possible.
Yeah.
So,
the Adidas stripes, they have to go on the shoulders. Is that correct?
For this,
These are the templates. You occasionally see them going down, running down the sides.
Yeah, we had the maroon kit that had the gold ones, didn't it, on the side?
Yeah,
which I quite like. Was a fan of that, and I think some of my early iterations before seeing it had that. But yeah, the same with years ago. If you remember, I think they did some kits where they had the Adidas sort of rings on the end of the cuffs.
Yeah.
And I always quite like that. It's quite American football.
That reminds me of the Rangers kit. Does that one actually? The ones on the sleeves.
You get the Gaza one with the high collar.
Yeah, but this obviously lends itself to having competition badges on the shoulders, things like that, because they stop just at the shoulders.
Yeah, I mean, if you compare this season to the previous two Adidas ones, they've managed to kind of push the template so the stripes are longer. So there is more stripe on this kit than I think there was in the previous 2 years. Because they've just moved the shoulder sections down a little bit. So, but I think that's good. It means there's kind of a bit more leads on those shoulders.
It's possibly just me showing my age, but I kind of like it if the stripe is the full shoulder, and I understand why it can't be. I like it to come right down the arm. It reminds me of the classic kind of Holland...
the Arsenal kits as well.
Yeah, the Arsenal like bruised banana kit and that kind of era of it. And I also like the old style Adidas badge more as well, the trefoil one.
The originals now, yeah.
Yeah, see, I prefer that.
I mean, I'm sure I did ask at the time, can we have a long-sleeved kit? Because, we're just time-stamping this, it's like after the Watford game, imagine Jorginho running around in a full, the full long-sleeved, all the stripes all the way down. I mean, I think that would just set it off even nicer. And,
I guess
they would sell.
Yeah, but they would, wouldn't they, for old farts like us? But I guess the break that you need for the competition badges on the sleeves would then creates like a bit of a design challenge in itself, doesn't it?
Well, they do them. I mean, the elite level clubs, so Arsenal, Man United, Juventus, Bayern, you do get the long sleeve ones, but unfortunately, we're not there yet.
So you're working from a position of make this thing as white as possible. Going back to the stripes, though, blue, yellow, blue. Oh, chef's kiss.
Thank you.
It's the thing I think a lot of people wanted. I think I'd quietly talked myself into believing that they weren't a possibility, and then we started to see alternate Adidas stripes appear in the last year or two, and I thought, oh, hang on a second, maybe it is.
Yeah, Sweden did it a couple of years ago, and Man United have had it, and it was again it was just it felt like it's the right thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, sometimes being a designer, taking the easy choice can feel really hard because you really want to put your personality on something. And I think, it's one of the hardest things to do. But
what, to rein yourself in?
Yeah. Thankfully, I was able to go the opposite way in this project as well.
But as Michael said before, though, you've got the last few years to kind of go back on and say, didn't get that right. Whereas these, I can just make the obvious choices with this kit.
Yeah, absolutely.
When it came to the release of this one then, how confident are you with this one going out? Because this comes out first. You've corrected the yellow and blue thing, which has been the main complaint of people over the last few years. Are you kind of just buzzing for this to want to be released, thinking people are going to like this?
Yes. Yeah, this was always the one that I was not 100%, but pretty much there that this is really going to work, because I really like it, and I'm a Leeds fan. It's always been the other ones that I've had more concerns about.
I mean, if there's one good thing to come from relegation, it's probably losing SBO top from the front of the shirts, because I think the boxed logo looks so much better than SBO top would have.
Yeah, so with that, the kits had to be produced, without sponsors on them. The lead time, for putting kit orders in is, sort of a year. So clubs don't know where they're going to be. So they've got to take a bit of a flyer. Some companies do it on a lesser time and then have the ability to do reorders. Adidas don't have that opportunity. So, what the club buys, what they've got for the season, which obviously that's quite stressful, I think, to work out what they do. And then the sponsors is the same. So SBO Top had a deal that was Premier League only. And, but I think a blessing in terms of design, just looking at purely on the design aspect of it. I'm so pleased that we've got boxed.
Mm-hmm.
I like that it can be on the kids' kits as well, because it's
absolutely, yeah.
As a kid, it was not the case because I was just 15-year-old walking around with Strongbow on my chest. So obviously they didn't really care in those days. But
that's the age though, right? For probably drinking.
Well, that is Strongbow, probably was drinking at that point.
I mean, I was going to say you've been drinking and gambling since you were about 12, haven't you?
But as a kid, I would have been annoyed if I'd have been like, well, that's not the one that Jorginho's wearing. Why do I have to have this separate one with,
I think it's a huge part of it. I look at the kits last season and although it was a bad season, I've seen the kids not being able to wear, the kits of their heroes. Were there many heroes last season? Moving on. I think it's a really big deal. And I think that's one of the other benefits of where we find ourselves is that you have more choices in terms of what you can do with the colours of the names on the back, and thankfully, the club were able to do, have a really good partnership with the other sponsors, and the other sponsors agreed to be the same colours as the kit, so AMT on the back and Flamingo Land, So I think all that. So
makes they're all colour matched.
They're all exactly colour matched to the kits.
Perfect. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Just actually on the back of the collar, the little peacock design, which is the only sort of overt non-white part of that shirt, apart from the stripes and obviously like the branding elements. It's the only really sort of little nod to design, is that bit, isn't it? Apart from the embossed. Yes. What's the word? The debossed.
The debossed.
The debossed, not the embossed.
Yeah.
So why did you pick that out when you're doing peacock? Did you not fancy redrawing something, putting something new and unique in, or did you want to tap into that heritage of the old badge?
I think actually with that was a bit of a club decision.
Right.
So, I was concentrating on doing the rest of it. And then, at the end, it was like, actually, we're thinking we're going to put that on the back collar of each of the kits. And it's like, fine, yeah, cool.
That is the bird from the round badge that said Leeds United AFC.
Yeah, what years was that? Was that
late 70s?
Late 70s, yeah. It didn't last long.
No.
And, that was always in my head was, you mentioned Don in the preview episode, am I bringing bad luck?
Yeah.
Is this a bad thing? No, the answer is no.
The thing is, I always find it strange that we in some ways we always say, well, if Don did this, you can't go against it. But he was superstitious, and we were hugely unlucky in that period. So for all of his superstitions, look at what happened.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
It didn't work. We got rid of birds.
Perennial runners up.
Exactly. Yeah. He wore his lucky suit. We still lost most finals we played in. So yeah, I think it's. I don't know. I speak as a completely non-superstitious person, I have to say. So I don't really put much in this.
Anything else you want to cover off with the home kits then?
Yeah, the only other bit was the socks has got the word Leeds on them, which is nice.
Yeah. Is that a font that you did?
Yeah, so that was again through, and you see it in the training, the pre-match stuff. Is I designed the word Leeds from a kind of like Art Deco point of view, so that it would just feed into the whole narrative through it.
Because I think with Art Deco, I think you think quite tall, thin letters is what I would associate with that.
Yeah, I think that's the easiest way to put it. Unfortunately, I think with the socks, the word mark is a little bit lost. It's quite small, and therefore it kind of distorts a little bit. So if there was going to be one thing that I'd probably change about it, it would be just to have another look at that, and maybe it need to just be a bit bigger. But I mean, the other thing to say about all this is we've got a totally unique set of kits, and there aren't many out there. If you compare, what other clubs in a similar level to us with Adidas, I don't know whether that's because the clubs don't want to do it, or whether it's it's from Adidas or not. But this is pretty amazing. I'm really proud of them.
And rightly so. Right, well, we'll get onto the away kit next then, Ed. So that's the home kit covered off. This is when it starts to get spicy, isn't it, when we get into the away, and definitely the third. So look out for this one in your feed, audio and video on the way. Then we'll deal with the away kit next.
The Square Ball Podcast.